Good morning and welcome to Falcon and Winter Soldier Fridays, which is what I am now dubbing it. I am Roth Cornet.
Fridays.
Fridays. I did say Friday, didn't I?
Yeah. I'm just saying
Oh,
Falcon Friday is the alliteration,
oh, Falcon Friday is the better alliteration. You're absolutely right. And that's why we have you here, Eric Goldman, to guide us in the right direction, to take an idea and then plus that up. I'm Roth Cornet. That's Eric Goldman. We're here to talk spoiler reviews for episode 2 of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So if you haven't seen it yet, please do check out now. Go check it out. Come back here when you have, and we will be discussing. Ryan, aka the voice of God, will be taking some comments and questions from the chat. So we will go into it in 5, 4, 3, 2, explosion, spoilers, graphics. Okay, this actually wasn't the first thing that I was going to discuss, but since he's right here before us on screen, Wyatt, son of the granddaddy of all granddaddies, Kurt Russell, as the new Captain America. I have to say, just a really small, insignificant thing that I did notice is that the mask does not suit him.
No.
This really doesn't suit him. And I think it's almost for a minute, I thought, wow, like they must have really tested all of these heroes so much in their suits, which goes without saying, when they were hiring the actors, because it suited Chris Evans so perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
But I almost wondered to some degree if that was intentional in the casting of Wyatt Russell, because it suits him so poorly that you kind of have this subconscious rejection of him, which you already would anyway, because I don't know you as Cap. What's your take on that? It's such a small visual thing, but I just
Wyatt Russell, a talented actor and a handsome
very
man.
Very talented, very handsome.
But the mask doesn't suit him, and I do think that it's such a specific thing that they have to go through with all these actors in these movies. I would think, or shows now, I don't know if they looked for it, but they accepted it, right?
Yeah.
They're like, oh, if we put a Captain America mask on him, it doesn't look right, but that's okay for the story we're telling, because we don't want people to be like, hell yeah, the new Cap is here. So that adds, I think that they were like, okay, we like Wyatt, and also he doesn't look quite right in the mask. That works,
Yeah,
like why not?
I kind of think so too. And it does really work, because, I already was sort of like, again, it's like, you're not my dad already. But then on top of it, it's like, you don't even look like you should be in that mask. So you're definitely not our America's dad. And I'm kind of like with Bucky on being a little irritated with Falcon at the moment, which is probably where I'm exactly supposed to be as an audience member for having rejected the Shield. Eric, what was your overall take on the episode? I want to talk about what we liked, and then I want to talk about a couple of structural things that I was bumping on a bit.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Overall, I very much enjoyed the episode. It's funny. I see. It seems like at least some people I see were like into this one more than the first one. And I was into the first one a little more, and maybe that speaks to me and my love of angst and pain, and the fact that there was so much like Bucky pain in the first episode, and kind of digging into that. So this one was definitely like, okay, well, this is obviously much more what the show is going to be, because we got the title characters together very quickly. We got what we knew was going to be kind of the buddy cop banter that they said going in. They're going to kind of give them this dynamic, which I think these two guys have already established and do very well. There were a lot of things that I super geeked out on from the comic books. There were so many things from the comic books. Roth, I was the annoying guy. I was the annoying husband who was like, ooh, oh, power broker, like saying things that Trish is like, what are you doing?
Did you guys go into it after the episode and explain?
It was one of the mornings, so we didn't, but
okay.
we will later. So I and there were some really cool things. I think I did think it felt a little more choppy to me than the first one, which I know was kind of doing the slow start and let's keep them apart, but I thought was interesting as a character study. This one was like, okay, now we're into it, but I didn't feel like it all gelled as much for me, even though I did like a lot of the things that were happening in it, and I'm kind of excited about some of the things they set up.
Okay, well, on one note, I will say that you're actually one of the most cheerful and optimistic people naturally that I've ever known. So I don't know you to be super into angst, but maybe in your television. I would say that for me, what I was responding to, and again, like I feel like this has been happening with these series. Like perhaps I am responding to things that the Marvel audience, which I am one of,
Yeah.
in total isn't responding to as much. Which is what I liked about the first episode, was that it was giving us a lot of character, you know, and it wasn't rushing anything, and it wasn't rushing relationships, and it wasn't rushing the evolution of where these characters were, and also it was showing and not telling, right? So like I didn't need to be told that he was reckoning with his guilt, because I saw him doing that throughout the episode, right? I didn't need him to say that. This actually felt a little of a reversal in that sense. The story moved a lot faster, but I agree with you, it felt much choppier. I was unclear why things were happening, and I don't mean literally I couldn't follow. I could follow it. I just was unclear. It just didn't seem correct, you know, in terms of the evolution of the characters. And I'll give you an example of what I mean. We're just baseline accepting that though they don't want to be together, that Bucky and Sam have to be together, but they don't. You know, it's like they're taking these tropes from the buddy cop genre where they've actually been partnered together against their will, but
by an authority figure,
and it's now their job to work together, and they've got to figure out, even though they've got conflict. But in this case, nobody's forcing them to do this. And so when they keep being like, I can't wait to be rid of you, I'm like, there's the door. Why are you on this mission? You know, or at least why are you joining forces with them specifically? It's just very odd to me. So that was one. And then the second one was sort of like another trope from buddy cop movies, which is like the court mandated therapist or whatever to work something out with you. So there's a sequence where Bucky is arrested for missing his therapy session. Somehow the new Captain Wyatt gets him out of that, but then she forces the session anyway, and then somehow knows enough just by having walked in the room about the relationship and the dynamic that's going on with Falcon, and understands on some high level that they need to be able to work it out in order to work together, which again, no one is demanding, and forces them both into a session, which Falcon has no, he does not have to be there at all. You know? He could just simply say no and leave the room. Whereas, you know, obviously Bucky does have to be there. So I found those things they sort of kept bumping me. Because it just didn't make any sense. Like I felt like they were trying to drop these tropes onto a scenario, but not map to it enough. Like, could there have been an impetus from the government? Could there be a reason that they truly do have to work together? Why would she know this? You know? And then also, like, they got to the crux of their problem so quickly, which was, again, rather than showing and telling, you know, Bucky simply says, like, if he's wrong about you, then he's wrong about me, and I'm no good. Which that's okay. It was actually one of the more emotionally effective moments in the episode, but Falcon's reaction was pretty cold. I mean, that's quite a revelation from someone you don't actually hate. You don't hate him. To just then reject it and walk away. So I've said a lot of things about what I was sort of bumping on. Like, it didn't seem to have kind of the character building that I craved, and I was bumping logically on it. And then I felt that their dynamic between, you know, it felt like Captain Wyatt was trying to get them to work with him because he wasn't unable to do his job on his own. That part was unclear to me. It was also a little unclear to me why we have to have another Captain America, and particularly if he hasn't taken the super serum, and he doesn't. And then also, if he hasn't taken it, how is he jumping onto that truck? You know, you must be super powered in some way, or have a device or something. All of these things weren't tracking for me. And then it very quickly turned to frenemies, you know, like in a moment, in one instant. Like, he just went out of his way to set it up so that he could work with them and try. And then, like, you know, Falcon just says, like, I don't think so. And he's like, now we're enemies forever, and I will see you burn and die. You know, it was really strange. Like,
I wouldn't say he went that far.
He didn't go that far, but it was like, it was clear that they were now going to be adversarial. And it was just turned on a dime, you know? So all of those things had me feeling like it wasn't structurally as strong as, and I know I'm probably getting a lot of people mad at me, so I'm so sorry, but I still enjoyed it. I still enjoyed the rapport between Bucky and Sam. The action sequences I thought were really good. And I'm interested still in thematically what they're exploring about this idea. I was actually the most interested in the villains, which says a lot. They, I think, came off the screen for me and came to life. They're clearly going to have a point of view that we can understand and follow and empathize with. And I think they're going to address some really interesting things about globalization, what it is to be an American, the multitude of America and the multitude of the world, all within a superhero show. And that's pretty impressive. I think it's where it's going. So there's a lot I still really like about this, but those tropes weren't totally working for me.
First of all,
my diatribe. But
first of all,
my diatribe.
I like that you call John Walker Captain Wyatt.
He is Captain Wyatt.
But so it's funny because like in the granular, I agree with you in that, like, especially almost more so is like, yeah, Sam didn't need, like, there was no reason for Sam to agree to go into that therapy session, right? I think I was more into what happened after, though, because yeah, I really liked what Bucky said, but also it's like, you know, this episode dealt a lot more. I mean, the first one was obviously setting it up too, but this one dealt a lot more with Sam and his place in this world as a Black superhero. And when he says to Bucky, you know, you and Steve can't understand why I would say no to this. And he doesn't get explicit, but we can read a lot into that, you know, about like, you know, what his thinking was or what he thought about. And the fact that this episode pointedly also, of course, introduced Isaiah Bradley has this sort of hidden
that was
Captain
the best part. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah. So I thought that stuff really worked. And so you're right. They're racing through a couple of like dynamic stuff that is funny to be like, yeah, these guys don't have to really be there. And I, you know, you can like try to logic it like, well, maybe Sam and they really want to be together more than they say. But at the end of the day, it still seems like it's kind of being like a little forced. But I think it was more into what was happening once they did go through with that. Because I thought it's like with Sam, we're getting some interesting nuanced stuff here about, you know, everything going on with him. And I mean, of course, you know, we'll talk more about Isaiah in a second, but it's also like that scene, of course, right after when the police hassle Sam and which, you know, of course, you know, is very relatable to real life stuff to the point that like, when we see like a very famous like Black athlete talk about how the police hassled him, and then they'll find out who he is, and then of course it's like, oh, sorry, and that was what happened to Sam here because it's like, oh, you don't realize that's the Falcon, and how effed up that is. So I thought all that stuff was like really strong as far as like kind of more centering Sam's point of view. And I'm curious, you know, we'll see how explicit they get with it, but it seems like they're definitely putting a lot of that stuff into the show. So I think that was really kind of holding me, even though I do agree that, yeah, the whole setup, like you almost feel like maybe they should have had Ross or someone come in and be like, you have to work together, you know?
Yeah, it just is, it's a small thing, but it does make all the difference in terms of why behavior, right? Like, which is, I think you're right, Eric. And I want to highlight, because I know that all sounded in quick succession quite negative.
No, but it's also like there's things that like we all have where it's like some things just like bug you more than others, and I have that too, you know?
Yeah. So to me, for highlighting what you're saying, the things that worked for me, I thought that was the strongest part of the episode. I thought Sam really, like, you know, we were worried last week, and I actually thought he was given a fair bit to do, that, oh, is it going to weight towards Bucky's emotional arc? But no, in this episode, certainly, you know, Sam is getting really a rich emotional arc. And I thought that was great. And I thought the introduction of Isaiah was great. And I thought this is opening up to what I was saying before, all kinds of really relevant and important and emotionally rich, in a story like this, questions about using the banner of Captain America to ask us, examine ourselves about what does that mean, and what do we do when people make sacrifices, and what happens to different people that are making sacrifices in the name of America, and what it represents. And all of that I think is profound. And I actually think the idea that they're going up against this organization that says globalism is unfair, and, you know, our resources are not distributed fairly, and we're taking the brunt of it, is fascinating, set against this idea of, we're not only exploring the problems and what it really does mean to be an American, and opening the door to that, as we should, we're also going to look at that in a global context as well. Like, I think that's amazing that a Marvel show is doing that, like through the lens of Captain America. Amazing. And it's the perfect lens to do that through, is this figurehead who we call Captain America, and we map all of these ideas of what that means onto, and then deconstructing that through these characters. Awesome. Like, really brilliant. And I thought that work, and the work that you know, the arc that Sam was given there, to your point, was just gorgeous and really strong. To me, it's like, the buddy cop stuff is, sure, I get why you want to map it on, it's kind of convenient, but I don't actually think you need it. Like, I don't think you need it as explicitly as they're doing it here, because the other stuff is so strong, you know. And I feel like you could have just given some kind of motivation for them to have to be together, even though they're feeling a lot of dissonance about each other right now.
Yeah.
And the whole episode would have opened up and worked a lot better for me. It was like ham fisting in those tropes was where I was bumping.
It was funny that after people, you know, some people complained, I didn't, but I know a lot did, that like, oh, they're not even together in the first episode. This episode literally has Bucky show up and be like, hey, I'm coming with you. So it was like a oddly rushed
out of
through.
nowhere.
Yeah, it was like an oddly rushed through aspect. I did like the portrayal of John Walker, because when he showed up at the end of the last episode, like we've talked about, we are primed to hate this guy. Like, who the hell are you? Get that costume off.
You are not my dad.
Yeah.
At all.
But then I like that then when we see him in this episode, like, it begins with a pretty sympathetic scene, and where he's nervous about going out there, and he's talking a bit about the weight of this. And I think they're playing it a nicely down the line, because by the end of the episode, I don't get the idea that we're supposed to think this is a villain, but he is cocky, and he does think like, you know, he does ultimately seem to think like, okay, I'm nervous about this, but maybe I do deserve this, and stay out of my way. So I think that's a nice, you know, in the comics, that's kind of, you know, John Walker to a more extreme. He's not a bad guy, but he's certainly unlikable a lot of the time. So I thought that was an interesting in with him here, and we'll kind of see, how that develops. But again, it's funny. I know we're not going to like him intrinsically. It'd be very hard to be like, I'm pro John Walker wearing that costume. But I did like that he had a little more sort of levels here, as far as seeing, you know, where he was coming from, and that he wasn't just like, I am Captain America, even though maybe he'll get there, you know. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. And Wyatt, Captain Wyatt is I'm sorry, I will
No, please.
to him as the actual name. He's a really good actor, you know, not unlike his father, who, if you don't know how I feel about him, it's strong. So
it's positive.
It's very positive. I love his dad a lot. I thought it was great too, and I agree with you. It was much better to introduce him sympathetically, feeling the weight of this, and because he's gonna, like, ultimately by the end of the episode, he is acting like a jerk. But I think we're coming from the perspective of understanding someone who's been given an opportunity, but also a responsibility, and really feeling the weight of it. And that can lead us to some not so great places, in some circumstances, because you lose the plot, you know, you lose like why you're doing this.
Yeah.
And he's just trying to get to a result. And I think it's pretty clear he might, I don't know, I could be wrong, and I don't know the character from the comic, candidly. But like, it feels to me like he's walking down a path where he's the means and the ends are going to disconnect, and he's going to just be trying to get to the result, and he's not going to care how he gets there. And I think that's going to say something about too this idea of like this figurehead that we map expectations on, and that in and of itself is probably a good guy and a good soldier, and that became too much, you know what I mean? That's where I think it's going. And I could be really wrong. All of that I think is so cool. So again, I want to caveat the kind of complaints I made at the top, and saying there's so much here that I really am liking. For example, exactly what you said, let's bring him in and have us empathize with him, but then also reveal that he is in fact a jerk.
Right. We contain multitudes.
We do contain
Yeah.
multitudes.
And on a like MCU world building note, I just have to note that so the Isaiah scene was great, really interesting. That's based on the comic book Truth that got really heavy into the idea of the American government based on real things that happened in World War II, sort of experimenting on Black soldiers to try to recreate the super soldier serum. With sort of horrific results for many, and then this one guy who became the new Captain America. They didn't tell us everything about him, but they told us enough to know that, like, yeah, he's gone through a lot of very heavy stuff himself. And then got to mention his grandson, Eli, who only has a couple lines, but the biggest project Marvel has not officially announced that they are clearly doing at this point is Young Avengers, because he's another one of them. He is Patriot in the comics, and between the twins on WandaVision and Scott's daughter Cassie in the Ant-Man movies, who Catherine Newton's playing in the next one, and Haley Steinfeld as Kate Bishop. It's like they have been casting every single one of these, so clearly it's coming. So
Ironheart as well.
Ironheart, America Chavez is in Doctor Strange too. So it's like, that it just seems like that's the announcement Feige will be making at one of his next big presentations.
Maybe at the virtual con.
Virtual
Comic-Con July.
It's something, something's clearly, something's at some point we're going to get all these guys together. They're not coincidentally introducing them all within about a year of each other.
No, absolutely not. And it's interesting because I haven't read that. I would now actually, but you're right that it's highlighting and pointing to real events that happened, and it, again, they couldn't have known this when they were making this show, but it's so relevant right now,
yes,
in terms of the vaccine coming out and like a warranted history of mistrust in the United States. And that is very, very powerful. So we want to hear from you guys. What did you think? Did you enjoy the episode? I think Ryan also might have a couple of announcements today, but correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan. And go, Ryan, what are they saying in the chat?
Announcements. Okay. So there are some people who I think I liked it a lot. Jimmy Jab.
Do you want to go do you want me to take them behind the curtain and know why I said that?
Yes.
All right, whatever. Too late. You guys have been behind the curtain for years.
No, I said yes.
Yeah, all the way behind the curtain is that I got a Google Doc update saying like Ryan sent you a script, and usually you only send me a script for these episodes if I'm supposed to announce something, but I didn't have time to look at it, so I tossed it to you, hoping that you would pick up what I was dropping down and say whatever I was supposed to say.
I did debate whether or not I'd send you a Google Doc. This is great radio. There's no other announcements. I just use it to place fan comments. Like from Jimmy Jab says that this show is a lot less cookie cutter than I expected.
Well,
I thought it would be a generic Marvel movie stuff, but they're actually doing some interesting stuff. And Casey Supersonic 1 says, I liked that John Walker seems like he will be a little more multi-dimensional. So there's a takes in the chat.
Do you mean that in the comics? Because I don't know, again, like I don't know what his arc was in the comics.
I'm only guessing. I don't know for sure, but I would guess even just from that first episode, because it would be easy to be like, this is just a bad guy. I will say he is, and when I talked to the showrunner, he talked about how they did tone down John Walker, who ultimately was not a villain, but was way more extreme and kind of like crazy, sort of militant, and in the years since they've softened him a bit. So they did make him more accessible,
Yeah, Matt got jokes in the chat, says U.S. Agent in the comics is more cynical, brash, and violent. He had enough character and leadership to stick around, but frequently crossed the line, being more merciless and having a violent approach. So it sounds about what you were saying there as well, Eric.
Yeah, and they have that line where Lamar, aka Battlestar, which was one of my moments where I went Battlestar when he showed up.
I actually had that was one of my favorite moments in the episode. Not for the reason for you, but I was Sebastian Stan, and the moment where Battlestar, stop the car.
Stop the
car. I'm getting out.
But he does have a line to John about. It's about like, you can't always punch your way out, or it's like alluding to like that this is his sort of dark side, that maybe he goes too far with things. And again, so I don't think they're going to go to the comic book extreme where he was like just crazed, unhinged, although they could get there. But they certainly want to portray like, that maybe he's got some issues.
Yeah, you know what I will say too, and I think it really speaks to the power of having lived with these movies for 10 years and 20
Yep.
plus films is
13 years at this point.
yeah, God, it is. It's 13 years at this point. Um, I I really miss Chris Evans. Like I really am with the characters in the sense, not in the show because I actually really am loving seeing them. I think I would have loved that even if he was still Cap in the movies. And of course, if he still was, it wouldn't open up the opportunity for this exploration of identity that
Yeah.
we're seeing, but
And legacy.
and legacy that we are seeing. But he really in that role captured, I thought like in an unbelievable way, the essence of, to me, what a person of integrity could truly be, you know. Wait, and that was his, and that's a very difficult role to play and have it
So
be
hard to make good
interesting.
interesting, you
Yeah,
know.
and he was somehow able to make
Yeah.
that interesting. I don't know how.
Mhm.
In some
It
ways,
was
so
it was
yeah,
very impressive because it's so easy to be like, oh, he's so bland. And
boring.
there's been times in the comics where he was that,
Yeah.
because they had a writer who's just like, hey, he's good and but doesn't put any nuance to that. So it was very impressive what Evans pulled off there.
I know. And so in that sense, I think that it's a rare actor that, and candidly, I don't even think they understood that he was going to be able to pull that off.
No.
Like, I feel like they cast him because he's, you know, for a lot of reasons.
For
He looks
sure.
in the mask, whatever. Eh, but boy, like, I don't know that who's going to be able to pull that off. And I guess that's the question of the show.
Yeah.
Any other comments, Ryan? Right?
Yeah, let me find one more
He just
here.
left.
While he's looking, I'll say that, yeah, with the Flag Smashers, I really liked, again, these references to the post-blip world and the idea that it's kind of screwed over a lot of people who didn't get blipped, they didn't get snapped away. That suddenly it's like they're going to lose resources, they're going to lose places of power. And so, yeah, I think that's really smart because it's great to be like half the world is back. But again, this would have massive ramifications a second time over for this world, and I'm glad they're dealing with that.
Yeah, Marcus.
Yeah. Just one second, Ryan. 1 second, because I think Eric just brought up such a good point, and then I really want to hear from you. But just to highlight what you're saying, I think Eric, that is such a good point because this is one of the more interesting things they've done with the idea of the blip, which is that it's not just the resources that are being reallocated to the people that are back, but it's that the power structures that were existing that feel so insurmountable to us most of the times, like we can't as individuals get any, and to some degree this is true, it's very difficult as individuals to affect any change because the power structures are so embedded and have been for so many years. To have them collapse in one moment and then have the opportunity to reform what the world looks like almost never would have happened. And then if they snap back, that would be devastating if you felt like you actually had been able to affect any kind of positive change. Sorry, Ryan, forgive me. Please say what you're
No, you're good. I was just agreeing with Marcus Y agrees with you guys. And you always say that the best Marvel or superhero villains, have a point. And I think it's a good sign that Marcus thinks that the Flag Smashers do. They say Flag Smashers have a point. Why give back power to corrupt government from 5 years ago?
Exactly, Marcus.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's just there's so many times, where people, like might have had a shot, and people that were, let's face it, some people snapped away were probably really crappy people, and now they're back, and it's very interesting that we'll get to explore that here a little bit.
100%. Eric, I think that what I've landed on is I'm with the Flag Smashers.
Team's Flag Smashers.
So I'll see you in battle next week.
You're gonna get that mask with
I'm gonna come in with the mask, you guys.
Nice.
I'm with them. They make sense to me. They're making a lot of sense to me.
Right.
All right. In total, we both, I think, liked the episode. I did have my nits to pick, which I did. But it's been enjoyable so far to watch these two series. My goodness, what they're delivering and continue to deliver as Marvel. And it's funny, the last thought I'll have about kind of comic book movies and I can't believe we still have this conversation 13 years later, but fine if people want to, kind of discussing the merit of an entire genre rather than each individual film seems bananas to me. Like we don't talk about any other genre that way. But I still have some folks in my life that will say, like, in in 15 years we're going to think all these movies were bad. I disagree.
No.
I
Mhm.
actually think in 15 years we're going to understand how impressive it was to place complex ideas in a mass media form again and again and again and again and again and allow them to evolve as we do.
Yeah, it would be like saying, "Oh, all westerns were bad when those were popular."
weird,
Of course,
right?
they were. Some were bad, and some were great. You know,
Yeah.
it's just that's we're in the era of the superhero movie, but there's a lot of really good stuff being made within that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you guys. Thank you for joining us today again. Thank you, Eric. And we will see you again next Friday. Please let us know what you think in the comments below. And as always, please do observe the pool rules and be nice. And it's never time not to be nice. I mean, actually, sometimes it is, but not today.